What's up, everybody? Your homie Big Cisco here. I've done some stories for Hood Horror in the past. I got my own channel now. It's called Storytime with Big Cisco. So make sure you check it out. I tell some stories from when I was a CO for almost 20 years in a Supermax prison for Arizona DOC and a federal detention center also in Florence, Arizona, Central Arizona Detention Center. Some stories about growing up in the projects in Arizona. And yes, there's projects in Arizona, for those of you that don't know. And also some paranormal stories. I got quite a few of those, of paranormal experiences I had growing up. Anyway, today I got two short stories today. Both are paranormal experiences that happened, one in a Supermax prison and the other one in a federal detention center. So the first one I'm going to tell you happened at Arizona DOC, SMU 1. It's a level 5 Supermax prison. As you can imagine, all inmates and convicts there were level 5 max custody. There were serious assaults against staff and other inmates on a pretty regular basis. Deaths were also not uncommon. Suicides also happen on a pretty regular basis. This story involves one of those suicides. So there was a particular cell where an inmate had hung himself using, I believe, shredded up strands from his sheet to make a rope. Every inmate that stayed in that cell afterwards would swear up and down that they seen him hanging at night sometimes. And inmates were constantly being moved out and, in and out of that cell. None of them stayed very long. They would always plead and beg and request to be moved out. Most of them would be pretty terrified too. Anyway, this one particular day, I decided to stay and work overtime on graveyard shift. I was pulling a double after working 4 8 hours on swing shift. So that night, I ended up working the unit where that cell was located. And I remember at the beginning of shift, the inmate living in that cell right away was calling me over to speak to me. He was a young black male, like early 20s. I don't remember his name, but he was doing time for armed robbery and aggravated assault. He was pretty much begging me, hey CO, can you please call the sergeant and tell him I want to be moved out of this cell? So I listened to him tell me about how he was scared to sleep in that cell, and he had just been moved in there that day. He said all the other inmates in the pod were telling him how, every inmate that stays in that cell sees the dead inmate hanging at night. So this dude was pretty freaked out. But I told him, hey, there's pretty much nothing I can do, I can call the sergeant and tell him you want to talk to him, but it's up to him if he's, going to come down and actually, talk to you. And of course, when I called the sergeant, he said he was too busy and never came down. So that night, every time I did my security walks, this individual kept calling me over and, to his cell and begging me to call the sergeant. Until finally later on that night, he must have just got tired, and he finally went to sleep. So, I went about my business, and about 3:15 a.m., I hear, this dude screaming bloody murder from his cell and banging on his cell door, and I was chilling in the hallway, in the office they have for the COs, just trying to stay awake, because I was working a double, and he was screaming and yelling, so I grabbed my radio and I ran into the horseshoe-shaped walkway that leads into where all the pods are, and I yelled for the control officer, hey, let me in the fucking pod, man. So it was like almost completely dark in the pods at night because, all the inmates covered their security lights so they could sleep. And he was, so I couldn't really see nothing when I ran in there. But I could hear him banging on his cell door, and he was screaming. He was like, "Hey, CO, get me the fuck out of here!" He was screaming crazy. So I turned on my flashlight and I ran up the stairs to where to his cell where the screaming was coming from. When I got there, I shined the light on him, on the front of his cell, and I'm not even lying. Homeboy looked like he turned white. His eyes looked like they wanted to jump out of his head too. He was stuttering and talking so fast. I had to tell him several times, hey, calm the fuck down, dude. And I was like, what's wrong with you, man? You having a freaking heart attack or something? And he was talking real fast, and I had to tell him, I had to keep telling him to calm down. He was like, I damn near did, CO, god damn it. He said, I kept, no, he said, I saw that motherfucker hanging. That's what he told me. And I was like, no, man, are you fucking serious? And he was like, yeah. He was like, get me the fuck out of this cell, please, or I'm going to hurt myself, just to get moved. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, if you're telling me you're going to hurt yourself, then, I got to call the sergeant. So he was like, yeah, he's like, tell him I'm gonna fucking hurt myself if he don't get me out of here. So I called the sergeant, and so as we're waiting for the sergeant to come, I asked him, so what exactly did you see, man? And he was like, hey, CO, you're not gonna leave, are you? I was like, no, man, I gotta stay here now because, you threatened to hurt yourself, so I gotta stay till the sergeant gets here. So anyway, he said he was sleeping, and he kept hearing whispering, like he could hear somebody whispering, but he couldn't really understand what they were saying, but he heard his name a couple times. That's the only thing he could understand. And at first he said, he thought it was the inmate next door. But he said every time he listened, all he heard was snoring, until he said he fell asleep. And then he kept dreaming that there was another inmate in the cell with him. And he was whispering in his ear saying, you got nothing to live for. And he said, you're gonna hang yourself, motherfucker. He said that's what the inmate in his dream told him. He said he opened his eyes and he saw an inmate hanging by a shredded sheet rope in the middle of the cell from the ceiling. He said the rope just disappeared into the ceiling and the inmate was see-through like a ghost. He said his skin and face looked rotted and he was grinning, like showing all his teeth. And he said his eyes were red and bulging out like they were about to bust out from his head. He said, man, I ain't prayed since I was a little kid. He said, I hollered, Lord, please come save me, a couple times. And then he said the spirit or whatever it was laughed real loud and then disappeared. I was like, man, that's crazy. So, he said that's when I jumped up and started banging on the front of my cell and screaming for the CO. I was like, man, that's fucking crazy, dude. Then I told him, so you'll definitely be moved now and probably be put on suicide watch, because you threatened to hurt yourself. But at least you'll be out of the cell, I told him, So as soon as the sergeant got there, we handcuffed him and moved him and all his belongings to a holding cell in the hallway till morning, where he would then be relocated to a different cell. So that was pretty much the end of that one. I don't know what happened to Homeboy after that. I don't think I ever saw him after that. But anyway, this next story happened when I was working at Central Arizona Detention Center. It was a federal detention center where we detained for U.S. Marshals, Homeland Security, and ICE. I was working 1200 unit at the time on graveyard shift. It was a high custody unit for U.S. Marshal detainees. This story also originates from an inmate suicide. So, as you can see, suicides happen a lot in there, In one of the pods of 1200 unit years earlier, An inmate had climbed the railing on the top tier and dove off, landing on his head, cracking his skull open and breaking his neck. He died, of course. This was after the inmate received a 25 to life sentence or something like that. I think it was for like drugs and like illegal firearms, that kind of shit. I don't remember if any other inmates or COs had ever experienced anything in this pod or not. Anything paranormal. I don't remember, if anybody else did, but one night myself and a young CO in his 20s was working in the unit. We were short-staffed as usual, just like at the other prison. And, ain't nobody trying to be a damn CO. Working with a bunch of crazy-ass convicts. But, we were switching out throughout the night, so that one person wouldn't get tired from doing all the security walks. So I believe it was around 2 a.m. count time. I entered the pod where the inmate had previously killed himself. So I first counted the bottom tier with nothing strange or out of the ordinary. And because like I said, nothing weird had ever happened in that pod before. Not to me, and or any of the COs that I worked with. I then climbed up the stairs to count the top tier. As I got almost to the end of the tier, I thought I heard a voice downstairs say, CO. So I peeked over the railing, and for about half a second, I saw an inmate peeking out from under the stairs at me. He looked like a young Hispanic man in an orange jumpsuit. As soon as I saw him, he disappeared under the stairs. So I shouted, "Hey man, what the fuck are you doing out of your cell?" So I went quickly down the stairs, and when I got to the bottom floor, there was nobody down there, like anywhere. I checked all the bottom cell doors and, made sure they were all secured. I shook them all by the handle, checked every single cell door, and all the inmates looked like they were sleeping. So I walked over to the intercom and I asked the other CO, I said, "Hey man, was any cell doors open in there? Because if they're open, it'll show red on the control panel, He said, "No, they all showed secure on the control panel. Why?" And I said, I told him how I saw the inmate under the stairs and how I thought I heard him say CO. And then how he just disappeared, when I went down to look for him. So he got pretty scared, he got pretty freaked out and was like, "Man, don't be telling me no shit like that." So, I laughed and said, "Okay, well, you have to come down and verify my count, And he was all scared and shit to come out, but so when we switched out, he saved that pod for last to count. And as he stepped into that pod, he tells me on the intercom, that he's pretty freaked out and doesn't even want to go into the pod. So I just laughed and I told him, "Man, get your punk ass in here and count, And he even asked me to turn on the pod lights. And, of course, I was like, "No, man, I ain't turning on the damn pod lights." I wanted him to be scared, So he smiled and flipped me the bird. And then he went in to count. And he counted the top tier first because, he was scared to go under the stairs. And he peeked over the railing when he was walking upstairs, doing count to see if he saw, anything under the stairs like I did. And then he went, he goes like this to his forehead, like relief because he didn't see nothing, So he finally, he gets downstairs and starts to count the bottom tier, but he started on the opposite side from, where I saw the inmate under there. And so he didn't have any kind of issues or anything until he got under the stairs where I saw the inmate disappear. He all of a sudden doubled over, and then it looked like he was throwing up or something. He doubled over like somebody punched him in the stomach or something, And I was like, "Man, what the heck?" I was looking at him, and so I yelled to him on the intercom, "Hey man, what the fuck is wrong with you, bro?" And he put his hand up, telling me, "Hold on," And then after about 30, 45 seconds, He comes walking over real fast to the pod door and tells me, "Let me the fuck out." So I was like, dude, what the fuck, on the intercom? But he just kept walking. He like almost ran out of that pod. So he starts telling me that when he got under the stairs, it felt like someone punched him in the stomach. And then he said his head started hurting really bad, like if he was having a migraine or something. And then he retched like 2 or 3 times and threw up a little. And he said, dude, I've never had a freaking migraine before. But he goes, I know that's what they feel like. People will tell me. And I was like, dude, what the fuck, bro? And he said, man, I'm saying my prayers the next time before I go in that pod. And I was like, shit, me too. I'm saying them right now. So anyway, I don't know if homeboy just had like his first spontaneous migraine headache / stomach ache or something, or if he was attacked by, some angry suicidal spirit of an inmate or something, but that shit was pretty freaking weird, man, and spooky. So for the rest of the night, we turned on the pod lights for each other every time we went into that pod for a security check, like some scared ass sissies, But it freaked us both out pretty bad, especially from what happened to him. But anyway, that's my 2 stories for now. Hope you guys enjoyed these, and don't forget to hit like, and like I said, don't forget to check out my channel, Storytime with Big Cisco, and that's it for now. Your homie Big Cisco. Peace.